Better days are on the way. You've been through a lot. Now it's time for you to shine again. This is the Wisdom Worth Knowing podcast. I'm your host, Craig Chamberlain. If it's your first time joining me, welcome. Thanks for giving me a shot. You can subscribe to the podcast on all the major social networks, including Facebook, YouTube, or Rumble. You can also subscribe anywhere podcasts are distributed. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Wisdom Worth Knowing is brought to you by Audible, where listening is the new reading. For a limited time, my listeners can get unlimited access to thousands of audiobooks completely free for 30 days. Just sign up at audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. That's audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. Better days are on the way. You have been through a lot. Now it's time for you to shine again. Do you have hope? It's a timely question to ask. At this moment in history, things aren't going so great economically, which can really start to weigh down on the average person, especially because, well, things need to go economically well in order for us to survive, right? We need some kind of stability, especially financially, so that we can stand on it while we operate and function in our everyday life. If our basic necessities and the things that allow us to function securely start to kind of dwindle underneath us, it always creates this tension of unrest and uneasiness that isn't easy to ignore. And so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about how we can deal with it, how we can handle the pressure, and then hopefully talk a little bit about hope, what we can put our hope in. So better days are on the way. The reason I really like that part of this quote is it does have an emphasis on the future. And if we're honest about where we're at, and if we are in a bad spot, it is difficult to look forward. I've noticed that whenever something heavy or significant happens in my life, it kind of cracks the foundation. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but as you function every day, you make a lot of assumptions about your everyday stability. You assume that when you get up in the morning that you can have your cup of coffee. Then you assume you can get in your car. You assume you can drive to work. You can assume there's work to do. You can assume your paycheck is coming this Friday. You can assume society will continue to play by the same rules it's always played by. And then something changes. There's a new factor introduced into your life that rocks that stability. Let's say you lose a job. And that thing you've taken for granted every morning as part of your everyday routine, that was your stability, now has completely destabilized you. So it kind of throws your life into chaos. And chaos is scary, Or let's say you haven't lost your job. Let's say there's a threat of losing your job. Sometimes that's enough to throw you off of your trajectory and to destabilize you. Maybe there's a death in your family. That certainly would be a destabilizing thing. Maybe you get sick. There's a sickness, even if it's a short-term sickness. That certainly is destabilizing, at least for a little bit. Maybe there's we did job loss, family. Maybe there's a relational issue. Maybe somebody cheats on you. Maybe there's a betrayal, not just in your intimate relationship. Maybe there's one in a personal relationship. These are all examples of things that are destabilizing. And the reason they're destabilizing is because they wreck the things we assumed would be running smoothly. Or at least if they don't wreck them, they threaten them. And what I'm trying to get at is there are underlying securities that we need to have in order to thrive and function as human beings in most cases. And those those components, that foundation, allows for us to take risks that are calculated. And so if you have a certain part of your life that's currently destabilized, you have to have some kind of a hope in the future that it's going to be restabilized. If you have a crack in the foundation, you have to hope that you can at least mend the crack or repair it in some way. So this better days are on the way is conceptually okay. So right now things aren't going so well. It's us telling ourselves, hey, things aren't going so well, but you know what? I'm going to move forward. And as I move forward, we're going to restabilize. We will establish a new stability and things will be consistent again. And so having hope that things will come back to normal is a good thing. Like we need to be able to bank on the idea that we can fix at least these problems or we can adapt to them. And if you don't have a lot of experience, this is a lot easier said than done. Like if you're young and you really haven't overcome any kind of tragedy or betrayal or job loss before, the significance of this destabilizing effect is very high, because it's not like you're going to wake up tomorrow and magically have the experience necessary to overcome the problem. And so what I've noticed is in everyday life, anytime something chaotic introduces itself and I panic, it does take some time for me to adjust. But as we overcome those things, as we overcome broken friendships, broken relationships, broken jobs, broken economies, as we endure those things, we build the character necessary to have hope. We cultivate the experience because we learn that, honestly, at the end of the day, as human beings, we adapt incredibly well. And you don't have to look that far back to see just how well people do adapt. And even today, when you observe other people, what they are able to adapt to is quite amazing. All you have to do is look up a story. I always talk about Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. That's one of his books. It's actually an audiobook too. And his story is quite amazing because he started in a heavily abusive family, and he was able to adapt and come out of that. And he shows the perfect example of it. I mean, it's a crazy example because of how amazing he did, but it is the perfect example of how stability can be obtained through tragedy and strength can be obtained through discipline. And these aren't things we like to hear. We don't like to hear it's like, oh, well, you can restabilize yourself if you put in some work and effort. But it's true. The human capacity to adapt is infinite. I genuinely believe this. It's part of the reason I'm a person of faith. I think that Christianity or religion in general offers hope, especially for people who are in absolute despair, whose lives have completely fallen apart. Maybe they've made some of the worst decisions. And it offers redemption. Redemption is a way of recovering from hardships, from dark times, self-inflicted or maybe inflicted by society. The idea of redemption isn't about becoming a perfect person. I mean, it's not about being a perfect person. It's about coming back from literal hell. Maybe your life literally fell apart. And maybe it's by your own hands and by your own doing. But that's okay. I mean, if you look back at the human race, that's a pretty common story, is things falling apart. What's not a common story, but it does become common if you embrace this idea of redemption, is coming back from that. It's heroic even. When you look at a person's life and they were able to get themselves together but things always went well for them, it's not as fun of a story. It's like, and what is your story, right? It's not as fun of a story when somebody comes from success and becomes successful. It's like, okay. But before I move further on with that, it's that time. Wisdom Worth Knowing is brought to you by Amazon Audible. If you're like me and you love reading, but don't have the time, then Audible audiobooks may be the perfect solution for you. With Audible, listening is the new reading. You can pop in your earbuds and discover that next exciting adventure, or expand your knowledge from any PC, Mac, Android, Alexa, or Apple device. And check this out, because you listen to this show, for a limited time, my listeners can get instant access to thousands of audiobooks from Audible's Premium Plus catalog completely free. Just visit audible.wisdomworthknowing.org right now and take advantage of a free 30-day trial. That's right, for 30 days, you'll get full access to Audible's Premium Plus catalog, as well as an additional free title of your choosing. If you discover audiobooks aren't for you, no problem. You can cancel instantly online. That's it. It's that simple. 2 years ago, audiobooks began to change my life, and they may change yours too. Pause this podcast, head over to Audible, that's audible.wisdomworthknowing.org, and sign up right now for this limited time offer for my listeners. And that book, Can't Hurt Me, by the way, is on Audible. Highly recommended, actually. It's a very unique audiobook. To warn you, it's got really bad language. He's a military guy, so it's all part of that culture. I think it's effective, personally. I think it's a proper use of language. Very motivating and inspiring. But this idea that we can redeem ourselves or come back from tragedy, it gives us hope. And that's one of the reasons I like I said, I like Christianity in particular, because the story of Christianity is a redemption story. A man was literally killed and then brought back from the dead. I mean, the literal part of that story aside, it's also metaphorical. It's both. The world literally destroying you, and then you coming back from that attack and from that destruction. Not only coming back from the worst point you can be, which is, in this case, it was literal death, but like I said, it's both literal and metaphorical. So we can come back from metaphorical death, which is hardship and suffering inflicted upon us by others, by society, by the world, by sin, quote unquote. People don't think about sin in that context. They don't think about sin as something that happens to them. When we talk about sin, we always talk about it in the context of what we're doing or what we do to others. But the world is a fallen world. And a broken world happens to us. There's unfair systems. There's unfair relationships. There's betrayal. Heck, actually, that happened to Christ. He experienced literal betrayal. He experienced literal rejection, and so darkness happened to him. And I don't want to get too preachy. The point is this idea of redemption is one of hope, and no matter how bad things get or seem to get, if that stability that we've had, that foundation that we've had gets rocked and broken down and deconstructed, and we have to figure out how we're going to come back from that, it's amazing to have that hope. To know that we as human beings can overcome some of the darkest and worst things that can happen to us. And just start observing around you. I mean, there's people who have endured immense suffering. And they found a way. And the amazing people, and these people do exist, are the ones who always have a smile on their face. And it's a thing we can strive for. So better days are on the way. You've been through a lot. And your suffering you're not alone, and that's the second part I wanted to really address on this, is that no matter how perfect everybody's lives appear, I can say this I got 37 years of experience, and I'm hyper observant, and I don't mean like in a fun way like Sherlock Holmes or Sean Spencer. I have a tendency to watch people, and I don't mean like creepily from a window. I mean, I just observe human behavior. It's always fascinated me, especially on a societal level. And people absolutely amaze me. I mean, they just do. Their ability to pull themselves to get the mothers, the fathers, the workers, people's abilities to wake up every morning, pull themselves together, and go to work and put the work in, and do it with a smile on their face and find that joy and find their little corner of the world that they love. And do it day in, day out, even as the world clearly is a broken place, people miraculously find a way to salvage, not only salvage, but thrive in such a dark place. And that's amazing to me. Like, it's easy to let the weight of the world crush you. Like, that's our default position. The world, we could sit around and we can rail against the world, and we can rail against reality, and we can complain and be bitter about the reality of how unfair and unjust everything is. Or we can take steps to, at least in our corner of the universe, even if our corner is a tiny little room in our house or our apartment or our cubicle, and we can make that small corner a positive, helpful piece. We can stabilize that. We can transform that into something good. And that is miraculous to me, that we have that power, that we can make our own little slice of Eden, out of surrounded by absolute darkness. And what's further amazing about this is, as we do this, we actually inspire others to do it as well. I've mostly been inspired by people who somehow find a way to do things well, especially amidst tragedy. That inspires me to do better. And so it's really an amazing thing. So hope is contagious. When you see other people operating as if things are already better and overcoming tragedies, because maybe they just shrug it off. They say, yeah, it's not great right now, but this too shall pass. And then they move forward. And then you stand there and you are angry or bitter and resentful. It's really hard to stand there and say, that person's got the wrong idea. It's like, it's hard to argue against that. It's like, wow, that's a really positive attitude. We could be cynical, which, by the way, is my default condition. We could say, well, it can always get harder. Let me tell you how bad it can get. So, but that's not constructive, right? I'm not selling hope. I'm selling despair at that point. And it's really hard not to fall into that trap, and I got a buddy of mine, and we frequently do this. we go down the proverbial rabbit hole of despair and end times. And I don't mean like biblical end times. I just mean like, it's going to be our generation, man. We're going to be the ones who end it. But of course, every generation thinks its generation is the generation that's going to end it. And I don't blame them. If you just look around, it's a mess. If you observe what's going on in the world, it's always a mess. It's always been a mess. And if there's one thing we've learned from history, it's that we haven't learned from history. Better days are on the way. We need to have that hope, that hope in redemption, that hope in restabilizing. And if your life has experienced one of these events that have rocked it and destabilized you and caused panic attacks and severe anxiety and depression, and that's okay. That's normal. That's life. That's what happens. Life happens. And there's no escaping it. The sooner we accept that we're going to have bad days, weeks, months, sometimes years, in which we have to kind of just put the pieces back together to the best of our ability. Remember, our lives, and I have to remember this too, our lives are meant to be lived in a very small scope and in a rapidly expanding connected world, our heads are wrapped up in so many problems that are outside of our scope of responsibility that it's really hard to remember that little corner of reality is it. Like that's your life. It's your job. It's your family. It's your friendship. It's your relationship. You know, these are you. These are the things that you were given or you took responsibility for. And we can focus, if we focus on those little things right in front of us, if we focus on our houses and cleaning our houses and our rooms, if we focus on cleaning up our family and relationships, if we focus on doing well at our jobs, and we stop thinking about the world in this macro perspective and where do I fit in the grand scheme of things, it's like, that's where you're there. You're where you fit. That's why you're there. Is it what you wanted? Is it what you expected? No. Generally speaking, it's never what anybody expects. You know, we don't really get to pick. There's some choices we get to make that impact where we land, but when you settle into something, that's where the cross section of your experience and your relationships and your bloodline, that's where it all section. That's where it all crossed, I should just say. So you are a very unique person in a unique set of circumstances with unique experience, and your growth and your diligence in that area does matter. You know, and I get wrapped up in this drama, the drama of the world story of my story. And I sit back and I'm wondering, like, well, what big difference am I making? What's my big impact? And you look for these mountaintop experiences as if life's supposed to be this big, what's the word for it? As if we're supposed to be bigger than we are. But the truth is we're not. It's all a trap. That's all a lie. And it's a trap that I've fallen into over and over and over again. And the reason I say that is because, and I'm just going to throw this out there, the most amazing people are the ones who treat other humans well. And if you think about when you're a child and you look at your parents, and your parents are everything. Think about you're wondering if you have value. Look to your relationships. And I don't mean dating. Look to how you treat people. Because those are the most significant and impactful parts of your life. You have no idea what kind of positive ripple you can cause by complimenting people regularly, by being polite, by having good manners, by being considerate, by loving people well. And when you start to sit back and wonder, well, what am I doing here? What's the point? What's the big plan for me? It's like, that's it. Like that's it. That's the plan. Because if you love people well, this is not easy to do. But you are, in those people's lives, a rock. You are that stabilizing effect that helps keep their foundation together. You are dependable. They can trust you. They can rely on you. They can be honest with you. And the reason I say this is because you as one person, if you try to go out and change the world, will probably be crushed by it. Because it's too much responsibility for one person. And it sounds like it's great and it's all good in your head because you're like, I can take it. But the fact of the matter is very few of us can even do our intimate relationships well. And that's me too. Am I loving my children well? Am I loving my brothers and sisters well? Am I loving my mother and father well? Am I loving my coworkers well? If we do this diligently, we won't have any time for anything else. We just won't. And you will create significance. It'll have a ripple effect, like a rock dropped in the water with the ripples kind of ever expanding outside of your little corner. It'll ripple outward. It'll just it'll ripple. It'll have a ripple effect. And you never know, 3, 4, 5, 6 people down the line, they won't even know who you are. But you loved them well. And I do think that the cornerstone of the Christian faith, where it says, love others, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. That's just supposed to be your vertical alignment, by the way. Don't chase greatness. Love God, that's his job. You let him do that. And then the secondary is love your neighbor as you love yourself. And he says, this sums up all the laws. All of them. That entire Bible, he's like, that sums it up. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. That's, by the way, that's easier said than done. Heart, mind, and soul. That's a calling. And then love others the way you love yourself. It's like, we love ourselves pretty well. We make sure we're fed. We make sure we have nice clothes. We make sure we're warm. We make sure we have good jobs. We make sure we're comfortable. So loving others in the same way we love ourselves, that's a high calling. And I would argue almost none of us do this well. So that is greatness. Whatever your definition is. And so if you want to restabilize yourself, that's a good start. And we could talk for hours about loving yourself well, because, by the way, self-care is included in that. Making sure that you love yourself enough to get a job and take care of yourself, to get an apartment or a house or a place to live, take on some responsibility, to learn a new skill, to commit yourself to a job, to commit yourself to a real relationship, not one that's just self-indulgent. These are all things that we need to do well for ourselves so that we can love other people better. We need to stabilize our own lives. And when the world happens to us and destabilizes us, we have to have hope that we will work toward that stabilization again. Will it look the way we thought it would look? No. That's the problem with expectations. But we can have hope that once we stabilize things, it'll be different, but we will be stronger. We will have endured a hardship. And then we can use that experience to help others who are experiencing the same hardships. And that's the way. This has been the Wisdom Worth Knowing podcast. Thanks for joining me today. Before you go, please like, share, and subscribe on your favorite social network. That helps the show grow. It feeds the algorithms that give recommendations to other people to watch the videos, so please do that. You can also subscribe and leave a 5-star review on whatever podcast network you might be listening on. It includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Check out the website at wisdomworthknowing.org for other ways to connect with the show and me. And better days are on the way. You've been through a lot. Now it's time for you to shine again. So let's work on being the best version of ourselves we can for today. Because as always, that's all we can do. Thank you and have a good day.